Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Lunch and Learn today, The Positivity Effect, Helping College Students Transform Negativity into Optimism and Hope with Dr. Dan Tomasulo. My name is Sarah D'Rizio, and I am the Vice President of Campus Partnerships here with You Thrive Educational Services. And before we get started, for those of you who we've not had the pleasure of yet working with, I just wanted to share a little bit about our organization. You Thrive Educational Services provides proactive mental and emotional wellness curriculum to help college students manage stress, become more resilient, and thrive throughout their undergraduate experiences and beyond. And our presenter today is You Thrive key contributor, Dr. Dan Tomasulo. Dr. Tomasulo is the academic director and core faculty at the Spirituality Mind Body Institute at Teachers College, Columbia University, and is also on the teaching staff at the University of Pennsylvania. He holds a PhD in psychology, an MFA in writing, and a Master of Applied Positive Psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. He's a review editor for Frontiers in Psychology Special Edition on Positive Psychology and has been honored by Teachers College, Columbia University with their 2021 Teaching Award. His best-selling book, Learned Hopefulness: The Power of Positivity to Overcome Depression, is hailed as the perfect recipe for fulfillment, joy, peace, and expansion of awareness by Deepak Chopra, and his new book, The Positivity Effect, was recently the #1 new release on Amazon for anxiety. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Dan Tomasulo.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being invited here. I am going to share my screen and jump right in. I have had 37 cups of coffee, so we're going to dive right into this. What I want to do today is talk about the positivity effect, but I want to encapsulate everything that we're going to talk about by using a quote from Thoreau: "Things don't change, we change." Now, the truth of the matter is, if we keep that up front, that idea that we need to look at things in a little bit different way and try to approach things differently, we'll have the essence of what the positivity effect is about. I like to start off my presentations by depressing people right away. So here are some numbers that I think are quite sobering, and these are all pre-COVID. And what you should know is that every single statistic up here has gotten worse since COVID. So we have a situation where there's a treatment prevalence paradox, meaning we have more and more and more treatment, but things keep getting worse, which is really an interesting way to look at it, right? So we have 80% of people with depression relapsing. And instead of just coming up with more treatments for depression, we really want to do something different. We want to start asking, what about the other 20%? What about the people that are thriving in the middle of all of this? And so there's lots of different ways of understanding why things are the way they are. But the very short version, and the thing that I want to focus on, is that people are losing hope, and they're losing hope faster than really at any other time in history. And so we want to see who is flourishing throughout this timeline. And it tends to be that it's the people who have hope who are doing the best. So the new book on the positivity effect is really about psychological capital, and that has to do with these four things: hope, empowerment, resilience, and optimism. And that spells out the acronym HERO. And with these four elements, because of the time limit today, we're really only going to be able to focus on hope. But hope, actually, if we're going to have to pick one of them, is really the thing that we want to focus on, because it's the biggest bang for the buck. With hope, it's unique among all of our emotions because it's the only positive emotion that requires negativity or uncertainty to be activated. So let me take a moment with that. If you look at any of the other positive emotions, anything like gratitude or anything positive, they're standalone emotions. But hope is unique because it requires something to be wrong in order for it to be activated. If everything was fine, there'd be no need for hope. So we need something either uncertain or negative that will serve as fuel for hope to be cultivated. Now, this is all under the umbrella term of what Marty Seligman has put forth as a new theory of well-being, and he's considered to be the father of positive psychology. I was lucky enough to be a student, and then he invited me on the faculty, and for the last 10 years, I've served as his assistant over at UPenn. And these 5 elements or what we call a psychological construct, meaning that if you were to ask me, how's the weather? And I say, well, it's 55 degrees, you don't have enough information. You don't know if it's raining, you don't know if it's windy, you don't know if it's cloudy, sunny. It's the same thing with well being. We need to have several data points, several ways to express it. So the PERMA model is one that gives us a tremendous amount of evidence-based approaches. And although hope is located in the positive emotions section, I've been advocating for us to call this PERMA, to add hope onto it, because hope really is unique in so many different ways. And we've just learned in the last 5 years or so, with some of the research I've done and my colleagues, that hope is something that you really can do something about and cultivate. I've written a couple of books about this, and most recently this year, back in May, I had the cover of Psychology Today on the power of hope. I do blogs for them, and we really, I was really impressed with how they're trying to cover the topic, because the science behind this is showing, particularly with college students, that there are very, very, very simple skills that can activate hope, but it's not limited to college students. This is something that I've done with businesses, I've done with teachers, because having hope tends to be a driver, sort of a power driver for all the other emotions. So let me show you a little bit about how this works. Hope is really a matter of perspective. If you take a look at this image and you let your eyes drift all the way over to the left, you will see a duck. And if you let your eyes drift over to the right, the very same image is perceived as a rabbit. And if you take a minute and you go back and forth with your focus, you'll start to realize that where you focus your attention changes your experience. This is going to become a really powerful concept, because this idea of looking at things from one direction and looking at it from another really changes our perspective. It also matters with context. If you take a look at these 2 lines on the screen, well, these can be interpreted as something very unlucky if they are part of this sequence, or it can be seen as the letter B with another sequence. So my point with this is that shifting perspective and allowing yourself to realize that there's a choice to be made in how you look at things becomes very, very important. I'm certainly not the first person to say that, but this goes all the way back to William James. My experience is what I agree to attend to. I can't even begin to tell you how powerful that simple statement is, because it means that we are the focus of our consciousness and our awareness. It's like a bright light in a very dark room. If I think that my consciousness is my flashlight, right? And I point it at the floor and I see mouse droppings and cockroaches and cracks in the floor, I'm going to think, oh, this is a terrible place. But if I shift my awareness and I allow myself to focus on what might be on the walls, maybe there's a Rembrandt or a Matisse, and all of a sudden, my sense of the space I'm in will change. And awareness is really the only tool we ever have for change. You know, psychology has come at this for years in so many different ways, but at the end of the day, it's our consciousness, our awareness, and where we focus it that becomes so important. If you would, I'm gonna invite you to take a look at this mountain and reflection in the lake. And if you can just see with my cursor, I don't know if that comes across, but look at the very top edge of this mountain range. And I want you to see if it's accurately reflected in the lake below. And as you're doing that, I'm going to invite you to take your left ear and put it on your left shoulder and look at the image again. So left ear, left shoulder. And what you should see is the head of an adult in prayer pose, and in front of that adult is a child in prayer pose. So I altered your perception in the beginning by saying, look at this mountain and reflection in the lake. And so you were oriented to looking at it this way. But the moment I invited you to look at this in a different way, you were able to see the very same image in a very different context. So often we make snap decisions about what we're looking at. And the truth is, we may need to invite looking at things in another way. Is one of my favorite artists out of Singapore. And now I can't see all of you, but here's my guess. The moment you saw this, which for most of you is an image you've never seen before, I'll bet you started to inch over and put your left ear on your left shoulder. And sure enough, you would see something different. Now, the reason why I do that and show this image is to show you that in a very short period of time, you can train yourself, you can learn how to look at things differently and perhaps see them from a very different angle. I'm in the Positive Psychologist Union, so I'm required to show this for 30 seconds in every presentation. Now, that's just a bad joke. But if I were to ask the question that normally goes along with this, I'd also be distorting your perception because the truth of the matter is this glass is completely full, half with water, half with air. It's actually a better answer. So sometimes we get thrown off because we're invited to look at something in a certain way and we get locked into that perception. Sometimes we are asked a question that invites a perception. But when we're looking at cultivating hope, we're trying to cultivate looking at things from multiple angles. And the reason why we're doing that is so that ultimately we have an experience like this, where we're able to see two perspectives simultaneously. Now, I'm not going to have time to dive into all the things we've learned about things like post-traumatic growth and resilience, where people go through very difficult times but seem to thrive because of it. And it seems that at the core of them is something known as dialectical thinking, meaning that they're able to feel two things at once. They feel their vulnerability and their strength simultaneously. And there are ways, we actually have programs, ways to help people do that, to be able to look at things differently. If you were to think about negative thoughts like pebbles and positive thoughts like feathers, because there's something called the negativity bias, which means that we're very drawn to negative thoughts. They helped us survive. So worrying and anxiety kind of comes with the DNA. But when we put them on a scale, they're like pebbles, and positive thoughts are much more fleeting and like feathers. So the question is, can the feathers ever balance out or actually tip the scale in the other direction? The short answer for that is yes, but it has to do with where you focus your awareness, where you focus your attention. If you focus on the negative side, what will happen is it's like adding pebbles to that side. You have to make deliberate and intentional shifts to look at something more positive, activating more positivity. Now, the truth of the matter is, over time, what'll happen is that that fulcrum point will start to move so that the feathers will actually be more plentiful and have a bigger impact. And so I want to talk a little bit of, today about how we stack the deck in that way. This again, is just a way that I've learned how to teach hope. This kind of gives you a little taste for what we're doing in positive psychology. That there are all these interventions that we can use in order to feel better. But I find it very easy to teach this if we think about the past, the present, and the future, because all the things on the left, the serenity, forgiveness, satisfaction, pride, and gratitude, all have to do with things that have taken place. Meaning that when you have gratitude for something, it's because it's already happened. If you can forgive somebody, it's because of a transgression that's already happened. Then we have a whole bunch of things that are in the present that become really important for what we can do in the moment. Kindness, as an example, or dispositional mindfulness is right in the present. And then all the things that lead us into the future, things like hope, faith, intention, inspiration, and optimism, are things that are to come. And what we've learned from the research is that the gratitude, if you can learn how to have more gratitude in your life, this allows you to be more present, and there's more information that you can yield from the present moment that will give you positivity. And if you can do that, that sort of lets you lean into the future. So I want to focus today on character strengths. In just a few minutes that we have left, I'd like to share with you a little exercise. And this exercise is a little bit like, I'm going to date myself here, like the Karate Kid. Yeah, this was about physical movements and developing that level of awareness. But we also have the same thing emotionally, where we have to practice things that are kind of routine so that we're able to use them when we need them. Now, this requires me to give you a little taste of something known as flow. Miguel Csikszentmihalyi is the person back in the 70s who came up with the concept of flow, which basically means that there's just the right amount of challenge for just the right amount of skill that pulls you into what he called the flow zone, right? This flow zone or flow channel, if you had a challenge that was way too high and your skill level way too low, you would have too much anxiety, or you have tremendous skill and the challenge is low, you'd be bored. But when it's just about right, we're fully engaged with something, and that full engagement is where we fly in our sense of flow. And you've all experienced this. He found the phenomenon that was worldwide, and in this flow, we're able to get pulled in a way where time gets distorted. We kind of forget about our body. I do a lot of writing, and sometimes I think a half hour has gone by and 6 hours have gone by. So I'm going to invite you to do this along with me. I'm going to ask you to think about a peak experience that you've had, something that was really over the top. Like it could have been 10 years ago, could have been the birth of a child, it could have been a presentation that you gave, it could have been a terrific professional moment for you, but something that when it happened, made you feel about as good as you could ever feel as a human being, a true peak experience. So I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. But more importantly, once you have that peak experience, I'd like you to look at these 24 character strengths, because what we've found is that these 24 character strengths, which are based on virtues, are the greatest advance in psychology that has ever happened. And I say that knowing full well the impact of that. We have 30 million people in the database. More than 30 million people have taken this survey. It's all for free. And if you take a look at these character strengths, these are the 24 things that we know human beings value and appreciate. So if you would, think about your peak experience and then identify 3 character strengths that you were using during your peak experience. So for me, I was using my creativity, my humor, and my zest, which are 3 of my strengths. What are yours? And if you would, just take a quick second to jot them down. So you have your peak experience and the 3 character strengths. Dun, 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 dun. I know this is gonna shock you, but I've been studying to be an evil wizard. And what if today was my final exam and my job was to say, I can stop you from using those 3 character strengths. Just those 3. You can use all 21 of the other ones, but what would happen if I stopped you from using just those 3? Now, if you would, I'm going to ask you to write into the chat 3 words that would describe how you feel if you couldn't use those 3 character strengths for an entire year. I really want a good grade on my final, so I'm gonna make you not be able to use them for an entire year. So as you get ready, if you would, please jot your answers down into the chat. What are 3 right, lost, right, anxiety, fear, stifled, limited, bored, free, sad. Notice the words that are going into the chat: frustrated, demoralized, lonely, challenged, nervous, sad, disheartened, right? Terrific. Not terrific that you'd be feeling those days. Okay. As you write this into the chat, you'll notice there's an incredibly strong theme. There's an incredibly strong theme that's coming from this. You still have all the other characteristics, but the thing that has made you feel the greatest is the thing that is blocked. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment with me. What if the college students that you work with, what if the people that we worked with, what if clients, students, patients, what if we started to look at them through this lens that they don't have something wrong with them as much as they're just not able to use their strengths? That if you're not able to be who you need to be, all the words that you wrote there are what's likely to happen. So that's what I'd like to leave you with. In this activation of hope, what we're really trying to do is get people to have more gratitude, get people to use their character strengths more. And what that does is it gives you a lot more hope for the future. I'm going to stop here and take some questions. Let me see how we did with that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tomasulo. That's a really powerful, multiple really powerful exercises shared, but especially that last one. So at this time, we definitely do want to open it up to any questions. If you do have questions, please feel free to put those into the Q&A function there so we can keep track of them, and we'll give Dr. Tomasulo a chance here to answer some. And while we're waiting for people to type in their questions, I had a question that came up. So I'm really struck by this idea that, awareness is really the only tool we have to
That's all
change.
we
I think
got.
that's so powerful. It's so powerful. And so if someone is really, stuck or fixated on one way of seeing things, particularly if it is, a less hopeful way of seeing things, how can we as educators, as faculty, or perhaps we're staff or advisors, how can we help students start to make that shift to a more hopeful way of seeing things if they're particularly stuck?
What a great question, Sarah. There's a couple of things, but I want to start with a bit of a metaphor because I think it's helpful, and it's one I use when I'm training therapists as an example. If somebody comes to you with a huge tablespoon of salt, it's this big nasty tablespoon of salt, and you have a 6-ounce cup of water for them to put that salt in. Everything gets salty. Everything gets bitter, right? But if you can become like a lake, if you can be vast in being able to hold that tablespoon of salt, that salt dissolves. It doesn't have the same impact. So the thing I would say is that for educators, for therapists, for anybody in this space, the work isn't on trying to change somebody when they're in a really negative place, but it's to let them know that it's safe for them to have those thoughts and feelings. And that once that happens, some of the sting goes out of it. I think the worst thing educators and therapists can do is, try to change somebody right away. But when somebody has pain, they want to know that that pain is something that can be witnessed. So the first thing is to just let people know that you're curious about it, that you want to understand it, to have them develop a dialogue a little bit more, let them explain it. Curiosity is the antidote for judgment. So you want to not be in a judgmental or a 6-ounce cup way of trying to contain it. You want to explore it so the person feels safe. And then once that happens, then you can start to recommend things or do something like I call it a positive deviant, which is you ask for the person, when do they not feel this difficulty? And when they say, no, I feel this way all the time. And then they go, oh, except when I play with my nephews. Okay. Then you introduce them to a differential. Oh, there's something in your life that is not as bad as that. And then you work on that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tomasulo. And yes, we definitely have more questions coming in now. I see here. We have a great question in the chat. Many of our students struggle with food and housing insecurity. How do we give hope to those students who are struggling so much, i.e., when things are out of our control?
The very first thing I would always say is to find the people who are identical to the students you're trying to work with, who have found a way through. You're looking for exemplars. You don't want to give some platitude like, oh, don't worry, it's going to be all right, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. They want to hear from somebody who has lived experience. So whenever I do consultations or these kind of things, the first thing we look for is who's done it? Who's had all these problems and found a way through, and what did they do? Because once you elevate their story, now people get genuine hope. Because if you just say, don't worry, don't, it'll get through, we'll fix it, da, 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 da. No, but when you tell a story in the right way, that's why I do all the writing. It's more than just the researches. I want people to know that there are real people out there who have transcended this. And then once people hear that it can be done, then they're much more willing to do it. I'll just say briefly, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile when it was back. They said it was absolutely impossible. And literally nobody in the history of running had done that before. He breaks that, and a month later, another guy breaks it. And then since that time, 1,000 people have broken it. So once people have an exemplar that it can be done, that serves as a platform for hope.
Thank you so much. And I think we have time for maybe one more quick question here. And so I see in the our Q&A here, how do you suggest introducing the topic of character strengths with a student who has alluded to apprehension about topics they might view as too touchy-feely or perhaps more emotive?
Yeah, great question. A way to do it is to just do a little bit what I did today, is to say, tell me about a really good moment in your life. What was going on there? And then here's a list of things. Which one of these things were you using? Oh, look at that. And how often do you use them? You start the narrative by using the person's own background, or you start it by asking them who their role model is. And, if it's an entertainer or a sports figure or whatever, what is it you like about them? Because the moment that they can articulate what it is they like about somebody, they're going to start talking about their character. Say, Keanu Reeves is my favorite, but you know what I really like about him? How kind he is. You always hear stories about his kindness. Oh, okay, now we've got one of those character strengths. So it doesn't have to be touchy-feely. It can be stuff about who are the people that motivate you and why.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tomasulo, and thank you everyone here today for joining us. I know we had more questions that we weren't able to answer, and so I'm going to share my screen here again. And For those of you who do have more questions or would like to, for us or for Dr. Tomasulo here, please do feel free to email us, and we'll make sure to get those over to him. And this presentation has been recorded as well. I saw that question come in, so we will be distributing that to all registrants. At this time, I want to say thank you again so much to you all as an audience. Thank you, Dr. Tomasulo, for sharing so much of this wonderful information, very needed information and actionable tools with all of us today. And please do be sure to check out his new book, The Positivity Effect. And we'll look forward to seeing you all at our next Lunch and Learn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.